Welcome, welcome, welcome. I'm Zephyr Lacey and... damn thing. I'm Zephyr Lacey and you're watching Sometime in the Last Century this evening. We have a very special show for you tonight and a special guest. What do you mean Obama is busy? What does he even do now? Scratch that. No special guest. I guess he has better things to do. Before we begin, I want to apologize that I don't have my usual suit on tonight because, true story, I spent 10 minutes trying to find the thing, only to remember that it's been sitting in a bag somewhere for the last 2 months waiting to go to the dry cleaners because, you know, Corona. Our main story tonight takes us back to the lovely old days of the 1960s. You know, that wonderful time before Instagram influencers existed.
The year is 1952. The communist revolution in Russia is 35 years old. Its living god is Joseph Stalin.
The Cold War, very much the, no, he hit me first of wars. The Cold War is known for two things, capitalism and sexy communist dictators.
Ooh, come on, baby.
These dictators included Mao Zedong, Josip Broz Tito, Mikhail Gorbachev, and the subject of our show, Fidel Castro. A man whose physique and demeanor screams comrade. And yes, that is a portmanteau of comrade, the Russian equivalent to bruh, and daddy, a word that should only be used by children and 16-year-old white girls asking for a BMW. Hashtag comrade, hashtag communism. During his rule of Cuba, beginning in February 1959 and ending in the early 2000s, Castro had a few issues. The US did not like the advent of a communist power rising in the Western Hemisphere. They fought against it adamantly, in multiple nations, destabilizing them for decades to come. But let's not get into details, shall we? Anyway, Castro struggled with counter-revolutions in Cuba throughout his rule, which itself was built upon a revolution in the late 1950s. Some of which may or may not have been backed by the US government. I'm not saying it happened, but it definitely did. The US even attempted to assassinate Castro on several occasions. And fun fact, my great-uncle was involved in at least one CIA plot to assassinate Castro during the Cold War. These counter-revolutions required action on Castro's part, and besides the usual guerrilla warfare and political corruption that follows most communist dictators, Castro also approved an interesting method to convince the people of Cuba that he was municipalization of locally operated farms and factories. Let's take a peek.
Si quiere, un trago de esto. El viejo mío es ingeniero agrónomo. 40 años trepado un quite. Camagüey, Nuevita, Guadalajara.
Unlike many dictators, Castro cared deeply about his people and wanted to genuinely improve his nation. This, of course, is up for debate, but some programs instituted by his regime made good progress. One idea, though, was a little abstract. Here's the premise. Let's genuinely listen to the general public's concerns. Write a complete sociological report about their desires for the forward progression of the nation and fully attempt to convince them otherwise through the use of a play and pretty lighting. That's right, they used theater. You know, theater, that one thing your Facebook friend Destiny won't shut up about doing in high school. Heavily inspired by the blue blouse troops of the Russian Revolution and Buenaventura of Brazil, this program was a group of college art graduates that formed a new theater troupe to speak to the masses of Cuba. They selected a centralized region on the island to name themselves after, and the Grupo Teatro Escambray was born. Hereafter renamed the GTE because Grupo Teatro Escambray is a mouthful and I'm a lazy nerd in a tie. The GTE settled in, well, I'm not even going to try to butcher that name. The ideo-artistic perspectives were concretized in open-ended dramatic works which required the public's participation and evolved into a lively discussion forum. These discussions were centered around hot-button issues such as the war, the land question, and the political proselytizing of Jehovah's Witnesses religious sect. The mixing of revolutionary propaganda with participatory techniques and developmental strategies evolved into a model for Cuban revolutionary theater during the 1970s and beyond. The GTE's first successful production was La Vitarina, The Showcase, which was a collaboration with over 120 local farmers, agricultural co-ops, as well as members of leasing commissions in the Escambray region, leading to a production that was open-ended and sparked great debate among the audience. It will be surprising to hear that one of the foremost critics and reviewers of the GTE was a Norwegian man named Erik Pierstorff. First off, what? Second off, how? And thirdly, okay, that's alright. Okay. Mr. Pierstorff, after seeing a production of a show called Ramona, about a woman running for office and being accused of being adulterous to her husband, was quoted as such. Is it worth seeing? Yes, if you're interested in theater. And of course, if you're interested in revolution. It is a phenomenal statement. Not only does he give props to the theater artists, but also acknowledges that, yeah, this was kind of dictator-esque. Speaking of dictator-esque, this is the GTE's actual mission statement, and see if you can pick up on those dictator vibes. Theater as a shaper of consciousness and a vehicle for the development of sensibility, thought, and individual judgment as indispensable stages in the formation of a complete human being. If that doesn't get the socialist theater artist in you hot and bothered, I don't know what will. This obviously had some ties to the sentimentality movement of the days of yore, but it really shows how present the propaganda in this theater group was. Movements like the GTE are defined as theater for development, a term used to describe theater used in so-called developing world countries as a tool for community problem solving and empowerment. As the GTE grew in popularity among revolutionary nations in Latin America, Cuba invited revolutionaries and exiled politicians to the island to study the workings of the GTE and to aid in the spread of this way of thought. And I mean, who wouldn't want to travel to Cuba to sip on rum and coke while studying Brechtian theatrical styles and listening to rewritten classical works of the Spear? That's what we in the biz call William Shakespeare. It's a showbiz thing. Finally, it is important to note that the GTE continued to put on shows for decades to come, despite having a few downfall of communism and socialist regime-sized hurdles to get over in the late 1980s and 1990s. And suddenly, this.